Be me, name is Owen. 41 years old, senior technical architect at Nexus Systems. Sitting at my desk staring at a Slack message, I'm not going to answer. Spencer from development asking for help with a database architecture problem. 6 months ago, I would have walked over immediately. Spent an hour explaining the solution. Drawn diagrams on the whiteboard. Made sure he understood, not just the what but the why. That's who I was. The guy who helped everyone. 15 years of expertise, freely shared. Now I just type back sorry, swamp with my own stuff. Close the chat. Go back to doing the bare minimum. Spencer will figure it out eventually. Or he won't. Not my problem anymore. I used to love my job. Used to love being the expert people relied on. Used to feel proud when someone said, Owen knows how to fix this. Now I just count the hours until I can leave. One moment changed everything. 30 seconds of public humiliation. And 15 years of dedication evaporated. Because Phoebe Langston decided to make an example of me. In front of everyone. For the crime of knowing things while male. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I joined Nexus Systems 14 years ago. Started as a mid-level developer. Worked my way up. Not through politics or networking. Through actually being good at my job. I understood systems at a deep level. Could see how pieces connected. Could diagnose problems others couldn't find. Could design architectures that scaled. Over the years, I became the go-to person. Complex technical problem nobody could solve. Ask Owen. Legacy system nobody understood anymore. Owen built half of it, he'll know. New project needs architecture review. Get Owen's input before committing. I wasn't management, didn't want to be. Just wanted to solve interesting problems. And help people learn. I mentored dozens of developers over the years. Men and women didn't matter. If someone wanted to learn, I taught them. Spent countless hours explaining concepts. Drawing diagrams. Walking through code. Watching people's faces light up when something clicked. That was my reward. Not money or titles. Just the satisfaction of sharing knowledge. Making others better. Building something together. The department was about 40 people. Mix of developers, architects, engineers. Good team, collaborative culture. We respected each other's expertise. Asked for help without ego. Gave help without condescension. It worked because trust existed. Trust that your questions wouldn't be mocked. Trust that your expertise would be valued. Trust that we were all on the same side. 2 years ago, our team led retired. Guy named Bernard, old school but fair. Treated everyone the same. Valued competence over everything. Didn't care what you looked like. Cared whether you could do the job. Company hired a replacement. Phoebe Langston, 38, came from a startup in Austin. Impressive resume. Led successful product launches. Also, very active on LinkedIn. Lots of posts about women in tech. Breaking glass ceilings. Dismantling boys' club culture. I didn't think much of it. Supporting women in tech seemed fine. Industry does have representation issues. If she wanted to champion that cause, good for her. First month Phoebe observed and learned. Sat in on meetings, reviewed projects, met with people. She met with me for an hour. Asked about my role, my expertise, my approach. I explained how I helped with architecture decisions. How I mentored junior developers. How I served as institutional knowledge. She nodded, but her expression was hard to read. Asked if I ever felt like I dominated conversations. I said I tried to listen first, share when asked. She wrote something down and moved on. Second month, she started making changes. Restructured meeting formats. Implemented speaking time tracking. Wanted to ensure equal participation. Made sense in theory. Some people did dominate discussions. Others were too shy to speak up. Balancing that seemed reasonable. But the implementation fell off. She'd interrupt men mid-sentence. Let's hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet. But let women finish even if they'd already spoken multiple times. The balance wasn't about time. It was about gender. Men got cut off. Women got space, regardless of what they were saying. Third month, the tension started showing. Phoebe made comments in meetings that felt pointed. When Craig suggested a technical approach, she said, "Let's not default to the first male voice in the room." When Spencer asked a clarifying question, she said, "Some of us don't need everything explained twice." Little jabs always at men, never quite crossing a line, but accumulating, creating an atmosphere. I noticed the men in the department getting quieter, speaking less in meetings, volunteering fewer ideas, self-censoring to avoid being targeted. The women noticed too. Meredith, one of our best senior developers, mentioned it to me. Said the meetings felt weird now, like there were landmines everywhere. She didn't feel empowered. She felt anxious, walking on eggshells like everyone else. Month 4 was when it happened. The moment that changed everything. Major project review meeting. Whole department present, about 35 people. Plus Franklin, the department head, and some stakeholders from other teams. Big audience. High stakes. We were reviewing architecture decisions for a critical system upgrade. I designed the original system 8 years ago. Knew it better than anyone. Had been consulted throughout the planning process. Phoebe was presenting the project status. Got to the architecture section. Some of her information was outdated. She was describing an approach we'd already rejected, because it had scaling problems I'd identified months ago. I raised my hand to clarify. Phoebe acknowledged me with a sigh. "Yes, Owen." I explained politely that the approach she mentioned had been evaluated and rejected due to scaling concerns. We'd chosen a different architecture. I started to explain why. She cut me off. "Owen, I'm aware you have opinions about everything, but this presentation isn't your personal platform." I said, "I'm just trying to clarify the actual architecture. The stakeholders should have accurate information." She looked at me with obvious contempt. "What you call clarifying, others might call mansplaining. Your 15 years of experience doesn't make you the authority on everything." Some of us managed to become experts without needing to dominate every conversation. The room went completely silent. 35 people frozen in shock. I felt my face flush hot, heart pounding in my ears. She continued, "Perhaps if you spent less time explaining things people already know, and more time listening to perspectives other than your own, the team might actually function better." Please let me finish my presentation. I sat there unable to speak, publicly called a mansplainer. In front of my colleagues, in front of my boss, in front of stakeholders, for trying to correct misinformation about a system I designed, that I was asked to consult on. Nobody said anything. Not Franklin, not the stakeholders, not my colleagues who knew I was right. Everyone just looked at their laptops, afraid to be associated with me, afraid to be next. Meeting continued like nothing happened, but something had happened, something irreversible. I don't remember the rest of the meeting, just sat there in a fog of humiliation. When it ended, I walked to my desk, sat down, stared at my screen, couldn't focus, couldn't think, just kept hearing her voice. Mansplaining. Personal platform. Dominate every conversation. 15 years of dedicated service. Thousands of hours helping people. Reduced to a stereotype. A joke. A cautionary tale about men who think they know things. Meredith came by my desk an hour later. Said quietly, "That was really unfair, Owen. Everyone knows you were right." I appreciated her saying that, but it didn't help. She couldn't unsay what Phoebe said. Couldn't unmake 35 people watch me get humiliated. Couldn't restore what had been taken. That night, I told my wife what happened. She was furious on my behalf. Said I should report it to HR. Document the hostile work environment. I said, "What's the point? Phoebe's a woman, I'm a man." She called it mansplaining. HR would probably agree with her. Say I needed to be more mindful of how I communicated. Turn it into a lesson about my behavior, not hers. I'd seen it happen before. Man complains about treatment. Gets told he's being defensive. Woman's behavior gets excused. Man learns to keep his mouth shut. That's what I learned.
Keep your mouth shut.
Week after the incident, I stopped volunteering information in meetings. If someone asked me directly, I'd give minimal answers. Otherwise, stayed silent. Phoebe seemed pleased. Probably thought she'd succeeded in curbing my dominance. Really, she'd just killed my willingness to contribute. Spencer came to me with a technical question. Something I could have solved in 5 minutes. I said I'm probably not the right person to ask. Don't want to mansplain. He looked at me confused. Said, Owen, I literally asked for your help. I shrugged. Maybe ask someone else, get a different perspective. He walked away looking hurt. I felt bad, but I also felt something else. Protection. If I didn't help, I couldn't be accused of dominating. If I didn't share expertise, I couldn't be called a mansplainer. The safest thing was to do nothing. Same pattern repeated with others. Craig asked about a legacy system. I said I don't remember the details, check the documentation. Yolanda, a junior developer, asked for mentoring. I said I'm not really doing that anymore, try Meredith. One by one I turned people away. Built walls where doors used to be. Withdrew behind a barrier of minimal engagement. Month 2 after the incident. The effect started spreading. Other men in the department had watched what happened. Drawn the obvious conclusion. Speaking up was dangerous. Sharing expertise was risky. Better to stay quiet and protect yourself. Meetings became hollow. People sat silently. Waited to be called on. Gave brief answers. Didn't elaborate, didn't challenge, didn't engage. The collaborative energy that made us good was replaced by cautious self-preservation. Problems that used to get solved through discussion now lingered because nobody wanted to speak up. Ideas that used to flow freely stayed locked inside heads. Innovation died, replaced by compliance. Meredith noticed it too. Said the team felt dead, like working with zombies. Everyone physically present but mentally checked out. She tried to maintain energy, but one person can't substitute for a whole team. Month 3 productivity metrics started showing damage. Project delays, missed deadlines, bugs that could have been caught in review. Went to production because nobody spoke up. Architecture decisions made without proper consultation, because the expert wasn't willing to consult anymore. Spencer's database project had problems. The exact problems I could have warned about, if I'd been willing to help. I watched it struggle from a distance. Felt a mix of vindication and guilt. Vindication because I was right. Guilt because I could have helped. But helping meant exposing myself. And I wasn't willing to do that anymore. Craig started interviewing at other companies. Told me privately he couldn't work under Phoebe. The environment was toxic. He didn't feel valued or safe. I said I understood. He asked if I was looking too. I said I was thinking about it. 15 years of investment. But what was the point if this was the culture now? Month 4 we lost Craig. He accepted an offer elsewhere. Exit interview, he mentioned the incident. Said watching Owen get humiliated publicly made him realize nobody was safe. If the most respected person in the department could be torn down like that, what chance did anyone else have? Phoebe dismissed his departure. Said some people couldn't handle accountable leadership. Craig's leaving created space for diverse voices. I almost laughed at the spin. Lost a talented engineer. Called it progress. Month 5 the major project started failing. The one from the fateful presentation. Architecture issues emerged. The exact issues I'd tried to raise. Before being silenced. The system couldn't scale as needed. Performance problems cascaded. Client deadlines at risk. Franklin finally got involved. Asked for technical assessment. Phoebe tried to handle it herself, but she didn't have the deep expertise. Eventually, had to come to me. Stood at my desk, looking uncomfortable. Owen, we need your input on the architecture issues. I looked at her. The woman who'd humiliated me in front of everyone. Now asking for my expertise. The expertise she'd called mansplaining. I said I'm probably not the right person. Don't want to dominate the conversation. She flinched. I know things were said, but this is critical. I said things were said, yes. In front of 35 people. My competence questioned. My intentions mocked. Now you need my help. She didn't apologize. Just said the project needs you, Owen. I said the project needed me 6 months ago too. When I tried to share accurate information. And you called it mansplaining. I turned back to my screen. I have my own work to do. She stood there for a moment, then walked away. I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction exactly. More like closure. She'd dismissed my expertise when it was freely offered. Now she'd pay the price of demanding it. Franklin called me to his office that afternoon. Asked what happened with Phoebe. I told him the whole story. The incident, the humiliation, the aftermath. How I'd withdrawn because speaking up wasn't safe. How others had done the same. How the team had died because the leader killed it. Franklin listened without interrupting. Then asked why I hadn't come to him before. I said honestly, I assumed HR would side with her. Man complains about woman, man gets blamed. That's how it usually goes. He nodded slowly. Said he wished I'd trusted him. But he understood why I didn't. Said the project problems had made things visible. He'd been hearing concerns from multiple people. Putting pieces together. The picture wasn't good for Phoebe. Week later, Phoebe was placed on administrative leave. Pending review of her leadership approach. HR sent surveys to the entire department. Anonymous feedback about team culture. The responses were apparently devastating. I didn't see them, but heard they were detailed. Multiple people describing the same pattern. Men silenced, expertise dismissed, collaboration killed. Month 6 Phoebe was moved to a different role. Individual contributor, no direct reports. Not fired, but effectively demoted. The announcement was carefully worded. Organizational restructuring. New leadership approach needed. Everyone knew what it really meant. Franklin became interim team lead. First meeting, he addressed what happened. Said the last year had damaged the team. Trust had been broken. Communication had collapsed. Rebuilding would take time. He looked at me directly. Said some people had been treated unfairly. Their expertise dismissed, their contributions mocked. He was committed to creating an environment where everyone's knowledge was valued, where asking questions wasn't weakness, where helping others wasn't dominance. It was just being a good colleague. After the meeting, Spencer came to my desk. Asked if I had time to look at his database problem. The one I'd refused to help with months ago. I hesitated. Old instincts said protect yourself. But Franklin's words were fresh. And Phoebe was gone. I said sure, let me see what you've got. Spent 2 hours with him. Explained the architecture, the patterns, the pitfalls. Watched his face light up when things clicked. Just like the old days. When I finished, he said, "Thank you, Owen. I missed this." I said, "Me too." More than I realized. Recovery took time. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. Some damage was permanent. Craig was gone. 2 others had left during the bad months. Institutional knowledge walked out the door. But slowly the team came back to life. People started speaking up again. Started asking for help without fear. Started offering expertise without worrying about accusations. The collaborative energy returned. Not completely, scars remained. But enough to function. Enough to succeed. Year later, I got promoted to principal architect. Franklin pushed for it. Said I deserved recognition for years of contribution. And acknowledgement of what I'd endured. I appreciated that. Not the titles so much, but the recognition that what happened was wrong. That I hadn't been the problem. The leadership had been the problem. I mentor people again now. Spencer, Yolanda, new folks who've joined. Share my expertise freely. Answer questions thoroughly. Help people grow. Like I always did. Before someone decided that was a flaw. I think about Phoebe sometimes. She's still at the company. Individual contributor role, keeps to herself. Don't know if she learned anything. If she understands what she destroyed. Probably thinks she was treated unfairly. Punished for challenging male dominance. Not for being cruel to a colleague who was just trying to help. That's the thing about ideology. It can blind you to your own cruelty. Make you think you're fighting oppression when you're actually creating it. She called my expertise mansplaining, my helpfulness domination, my knowledge a weapon, and convinced herself she was the victim when she was the one attacking. My daughter is in engineering school now. I told her about what happened, not as a warning about women, but as a warning about ideology. Any ideology that justifies cruelty isn't worth following. Any leader who humiliates people publicly isn't worth following. Respect isn't gendered. Kindness isn't gendered. Competence isn't gendered. Judge people by their actions, not their demographics. And never let anyone make you feel small for being good at your job. That's not privilege. That's not dominance. That's just earning your place through years of work. Anyway, that's the story of how one moment, 30 seconds of public humiliation, destroyed a team's trust completely. I was the expert everyone relied on. 15 years of freely shared knowledge. Thousands of hours helping colleagues. One comment from a new leader. Mansplaining, she called it. Dominating, she called it. In front of 35 people. Including my boss. Including stakeholders. The most humiliating moment of my career. And the response was silence. Nobody defended me. Nobody pushed back. Everyone learned the lesson. Speaking up isn't safe. Expertise isn't valued. Better to stay quiet. So, everyone went quiet. And the team died. Meetings became hollow. Collaboration disappeared. Innovation stopped. Good people left. Projects failed. Until the damage was undeniable. And, even then, the leader blamed everyone else. Never acknowledged what she'd done. Never apologized. Just got reassigned. And probably still thinks she was right. One moment of cruelty. 15 years of trust destroyed. That's the power of leadership. For good or for evil. Use it carefully. Or don't use it at all.